This podcast contains strong language and discussions about relationships, sex, and love. It may not be suitable for younger listeners. This is the Sex and Singapore City podcast, and I am Nick Selena. Hi guys, it's Nick Selena. How are we all doing on this Monday evening? I hope everyone is keeping well and staying happy and healthy. Today's episode is actually a request from one of my Instagram followers. I still have a list, guys. I have not ignored you, of all of your submissions to me on podcast ideas. Some of them I have done already. Some of them I couldn't do because of the topic, and some of them are in the go. So this one is 10 tips on keeping the romance and sex alive in a long-term relationship. This was not a request from just one person. It was from many people. It's definitely something I haven't touched upon yet, and it's very crucial and key. We want to know, how do we keep a happy and healthy sex life in a long-term relationship? How do you continue to have that spark? How do you continue to, have great sex, keep the momentum going? It's not easy, right? Anyone who's in a long-term relationship or has been before, we all know facts are facts. The honeymoon phase from whence you first met, when it was like, can't keep your hands off each other, having sex here, there and everywhere, living on cloud 9. Of course, the natural progression of a relationship is that does, I'm not going to say dwindle, but it does die down into a more stable routine and rhythm between the pair of you. That's why it's called the honeymoon phase. Honeymoons don't last forever, do they? They're like, a couple of weeks trip. Woohoo, living my high life. Then it's back to reality. It's not sustainable. But that doesn't mean that when you become into your routine and you're, a year in, 2 years, whatever you would like to classify as long term, doesn't mean then that, your sex becomes shit, or you haven't had sex in months and that's normal, or, it's been a dry spell for like 10 months, but whatever, you love each other. Yes, dry spells are quite normal. I'm using the word normal here like loosely. Dry spells happen, not to everyone, but to couples. It's just life, Life happens. That being said, it is on people's minds. How do we keep the sex and the romance alive? How do we find time to be the way we were with each other? This is especially true once you have kids, work, marriage, whatever. So I have 10 tips for everyone that I think is really going to help. These come from a lot of research, my end, and also personal experience. Currently in a relationship. My last one was 4.5 years. Most of my relationships have lasted about 2 years before that. But yeah, I think, I could be wrong, but I think these tips will definitely help. So let's go. Point 1. Communication is key. I think to communicate with your partner openly and honestly, not just about the realm of sex, but anything, is key to a happy and healthy relationship. When you are feeling frustrated if the sex has waned, whether it's on you or on your partner, you really do need to open up communication. How and why does this help? Well, firstly, if you sit down together and you say, hey, look, it doesn't have to be an argument. It doesn't have to turn into an altercation, but say, I've noticed that, you don't seem interested in having sex with me as much as before. Are you okay? Is there anything on your mind? You might not realize your partner's going through something, maybe something at work that they don't want to burden you with, maybe finances, maybe family stuff. And you opening up that channel of communication might help offload. They're like, fuck me, she actually noticed and she gives a shit, and wow, and yeah, actually, now you brought it up, this, and this, and this. Sharing that load might then help relieve them, take some of the stress off, and ignite, perhaps between you, that connection and sexual passion that's missing. But another idea when it comes to communication is that maybe one or him or you don't realize there's a problem, and maybe say you're the one that's not having sex the way you did or as frequently as you used to, and your partner hasn't said anything. You're like, I don't even know. And then they sit down one day and they say, listen, you do realize we haven't had sex for X amount of weeks, or, I've tried it on with you for the last 5 times and you've completely pushed me away every time. And actually that really hurts my feelings and starts to make me feel quite insecure. You might be like, wow, I did not fucking know that was going on. And you might have reasonable, like, okay, well, I pushed you away that time because the baby was crying. Or, well, you wanted sex at 6 a.m. and I had 20 minutes to get ready for work. And then you can, reason it out together. If you bottle the problem, because it does become a problem, and this is why people are asking me about it, the problem of the loss of sex between you two. If you both bottle it up, then the problem just grows. It just gets bigger and bigger. A problem shared is a problem halved. But yeah, communication is key. It's probably better to do it face-to-face, not through text. Text can be misconstrued and quite emotionless. But I think being physically together at the time when you have this open discussion always helps. Always please communicate with your partner. And I know talking about sex is awkward. Well, not for me. I do it for a living. But yeah, it's weird. It's awkward. It can feel quite shameful, like, hey, I want to have sex more. But this is your partner, right? This is your long-term life partner. So if you can't be open with them, then who can you? Point 2. You need to understand and accept life throws curveballs. By curveballs, I mean stressors, COVID, moving away, long distance, work, family, finance issues, babies, pets. A great curveball is COVID. Who fucking saw this coming? It's what? I'm literally there I have lost 2 years of my fucking life because of this COVID that what? And I remember when it first came out and I was like, oh, this will, sort itself out in 3 months. Bless you, Nick Selena of 2020, you dick. So yeah, what you've got to understand and accept is this is, life. It's not all rainbows and sunshine. And of course, we'd all love to have this beautiful, happy, loving relationship filled with amazing sex and positivity all day, every day, forever. But that isn't realistic. And if perhaps your sex life in your head, you've idolized from what it was, I think you need to basically take a step back and be like, shit, it's life. When people say, I'm mentally exhausted from work, I've got no other time in my head or room for anything else, or, I'm terrified about what's going to happen next, or, they've moved away because something's happened and now you're not LDR, whatever's going on, you've got to understand and accept that and know that it is something that will pass, but also that it is something that you can work through together. So it is temporary, but it's also, unexpected, and it's unrealistic for you to believe that you or your partner can, just crack on and carry on as normal. It's not fun to say, hey, well, we got a baby now and we just got no time for sex and fuck this, we're just tired all the time. It's not fun to say that, but it's also accepting the reality of life. And it's about carving your own way through that period together. Point 3, acknowledging that relationships and sex have a natural growth and change. So this is something I talked about in the introduction, but yeah, basically I want you to understand and accept that it will change. Whether it's them or you, both of you do need to go, okay, yeah, sex will change. Your sexual routine will change. How often you can have sex will change. How often you feel like having sex can change. Maybe when you started dating at the beginning, you were getting drunk together every week, having sex 3 or 4 times a night when you were together. I mean, yeah, of course, that's not going to, be something you're able to do when you've got 2 children or when you're working until 11 o'clock at night. It is what it is. So I think acknowledging that between you both and for yourself, that relationships and sex with it does have a natural growth and change is really good, because then it takes all the fucking pressure off, right? There's no pressure anymore. Oh my God, I just got fucking, if he wants sex 4 or 5 times a week like we used to and I can't, and I've got this work deadline and stuff, all that stress will go when you both go, do you know what? I acknowledge that things change. And I'm okay with that. Are you okay with that? Yeah. But I want more. I understand that. Let's meet in the middle. It doesn't have to be an argument. As I said, it can just be a really good discussion where you both acknowledge that things aren't going to always be the way you want them to be or be the way they were at the beginning. Point 4, avoid making sex a repeated negative discussion, especially if one side isn't interested. Okay, what do I mean like this? Well, let me make an example. A friend of mine had a boyfriend who just wasn't as interested in sex as she was. Yeah, you heard right. The boy had a lower sex drive than the girl. Thank you very much. And what happened was every time he didn't want sex, she felt rejected, as most of us do, if I'm honest, a very normal reaction. And then she would be like, why don't you want to have sex with me anymore? And it became constantly a negative discussion. That's what we want to avoid, because then what happens is the person on the receiving end just gets pushed away even more, and they're like, I just, whatever, they tune out, and then sex becomes this big thing looming over the relationship. We don't want that. So how do we avoid making sex a negative discussion? Good question. This goes back to point 1. You keep the communication open and honest. And if, say, for instance, 5th time they've rejected you, or the other way around, you sit there and you say, quite adultly, hey, I understand you have your reasons to reject me. I understand you're tired. I understand work's too much. However, I just want you to know that when I am trying to make a move on you and I get pushed away, it does hurt my feelings. And I'm not sure you understand how hurtful it is. But yeah, it does. It makes me feel insecure. I'm well aware you used to want to have sex a lot more with me, and I start to wonder whether it's just me. So yeah, it does hurt. And I think if you go in that approach, to be open and raw, when you're vulnerable and raw with someone, you generally always get a better response rather than going in on the attack. Okay, if you don't want to have sex with me, fuck you, I can have anyone I want, which is kind of our, when we're hurt and upset, that's our defense mechanism kicking in. I don't want to be raw and vulnerable. So fuck you, I'm going to go, I can have anyone I want. I'll go and download Tinder. By the way, good luck with Tinder. But yeah, don't allow sex to always repeatedly become a negative discussion. It can, of course, be here or there, the odd argument, fine, but it can't become something that is always, a negative experience for both of you, because then it just pushes it away even more and creates a larger void. Point number 5. Date nights are important as fuck. Date nights, woo, date nights. Why are date nights so important? Let me tell you. Because it's how you first met. Usually we meet someone, we go on dates, we have fun. It's so intimate. It's just us two. Wherever you're doing, dinner, ice skating, bowling, cinema, going to the park, whatever it is, it's just you two connecting. It's so precious. And when life throws these curveballs and gets in the way, which it does, creating that space for date night is so, so important. I understand, especially if you have children, or a very demanding job that it's not easy. Like, you've got to get a babysitter, you've got to find time. You're tired. You are tired. You didn't sleep last night. Baby number 2 was crying and little ones, needs this and this and this for school and whatever it is. I get it. So, to say date night every week, which is what me and my partner do, it could be, completely unable to reach that. Once a week's too much. Fine. Then maybe try date night once every 2 weeks. What's that? Twice a month? I think that's fair to ask. Or if really you can't, then date night once a month. But something where it's just you two. You need to keep that connection. And, it's fun. You get to rekindle that time and that moment. And you get to create more memories. And if you have kids, it is important to go off and do you too. You gotta. You go insane. You gotta keep that connection. I really wholeheartedly believe date nights change a lot if you keep them going in long-term relationships. I remember with my ex, he just wasn't interested at all. Well, in case you've not heard in all my other episodes, the dude didn't give a fuck about anything, but I would just organise everything for us because I was so hell-bent on keeping those date nights going, and he just didn't care. He did nothing. He organised nothing. I remember trying to force him to organise something for our 3rd year anniversary, and I was like, I've done the first 2 years. It'd be really nice if you did something. Nah, nothing. And what happens is the person, you start on the receiving end of that, you just start to feel unwanted and neglected, and then you become resentful and you're like, no, fuck you. I'm not doing anything for you. How dare you think that's okay to treat me that way? And then it just spirals, again. So if you're both putting effort in, you do this date night, I'll do the next date night, and you both come up with something where you can spend, it doesn't have to be all night. It can be a couple of hours even, But just where you connect. And I don't mean it has to be date night where you're in the sack. That's a great ending to a date night. I mean just going out. This will still help your sexual connection, just spending those quiet moments together. Point number 6. If boredom is an issue, you can engage in sex, games, toys, etc., etc. Oh, yeah, boredom it's going to be a thing, isn't it? You are shagging one person for the rest of your life. So, yeah. It does become an issue. It just is. It's horrible, isn't it? It is. And to say, hey, I'm bored of having sex with you, and I've had sex with you for 8 years, and I've had enough of it, that's horrible, and that's a horrible thing to think. But let's face it, shall we? Because that's what we do in my podcast. We face all the things nobody even wants to face. Boredom of having sex with the same person. How do we deal with that? Okay, there's many ways to deal with that. But I find, sexting through the day, I know that, work may get in the way and whatever, but building up some kind of, sexual rapport over messages and stuff really does, spice things up. Because you kind of, you can't get to each other. It builds that kind of sexual tension that then when you are together, you just want to rip each other's clothes off. I find that, entertaining kind of games together or role play can really, heighten things. You don't have to do this, of course. These are just my personal suggestions. And, the introduction of sex toys, if it's boredom and you're I'm not being satisfied, or it's the same shit every week and just wanting you to get it over with or whatever, you can start to perhaps shop around for some fun things to play with together. Even if it's really basic, like a blindfold or handcuffs. Trying to think what's basic, because in my world, Let's not go down that rabbit hole. Maybe it's like dice. Let's get some dice. You throw a dice. If you throw a 6, then I would take off a piece of clothing, or you get to do to me, what you want to do to me, or whatever it is. Just try and incorporate something that changes the rhythm. Honestly, boredom's a really tricky one because it will happen. 98% will happen, and it might even just be a temporary phase. Don't allow the boredom to make you start searching elsewhere. Please don't do that. Your partner deserves way more than that. Instead, use that boredom to think, right, what's my fantasy? If I'm bored with this sex, then what would make it not boring? Because I'm the one bored, right? So why would I put that on my partner? I'm the one that's got to deal with it. So what would I like? What would I love? And then whatever it is, express that to your partner. Like, hey, have you thought about tying me up? Or, something. And then, you'll be surprised, I reckon, at your partner's reaction. That's all I'm saying. Point number 7. Set aside time in your diary for alone time together. This is different to date night. How? Well, this is more like, okay, phones down on a Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday morning, or Thursday before work. We have a no phones time. We have coffee in an hour together. Okay, you rush off to work, understood. Then Thursday, when you get in from work, when we do dinner, we have an hour, no phones, no TV, dinner, right? This is just trying to carve out time together. That's one part of it. The second part I want to say on carving out alone time is sex. So look in your diary and say, hey, Friday, we've got nothing on. Get home, have dinner, put the kids to bed, then it's alone time, me and you. No phones, unless that's part of your fun. But if you're tired or boredom or all of this is a problem to the lack of sex, you have to actively carve time in your diary for alone time together to connect, to sexually connect. It's not just going to happen if neither of you are doing it. It's not going to, your routines aren't going to change. Work's not going to get any easier. The kids aren't going to stop crying. So you have to do something out of your routine and say, hey, every week now you don't have to put pressure on, because pressure also ruins sex. So you can't be like, every Friday night we have sex, because then you're like, oh, fuck me, really? The problem here is that your sex life has dwindled. So trying to stamp that in is not going to be productive. It's like, hey, every Friday, every Saturday or Sunday afternoons, we are having alone time together. It can be in the house, can be wherever, but it's our alone time. And if sex happens, then fantastic. If all you're doing is sitting chatting over a wine or coffee in the morning, also fantastic, because you're still building on that connection, which is key. Point number 8. If your self-confidence is a problem, you can address your own insecurities head on with yourself. So what I mean by this is maybe you've started to compare yourself to other people on social media or on the internet. Maybe your body's changed, especially after, women give birth, and you might have insecurities. Maybe you'd love to before show your tummy off and now you don't want to. Maybe before you would, when you were dating him, you'd take time to dress up in lingerie, and now you consider it a waste of money when there's so many other important things to spend your money on. That kind of thing. Maybe you don't want to be seen with the light on anymore. If self-confidence has, I guess, chipped away at how you feel about having sex with your partner, then that is definitely something that you need to address. You don't have to communicate this if you don't want to. If you're comfortable in talking about it, then that's fantastic. But if not, I think it is good for you to sit down with yourself and deal with this. Maybe you can talk to someone externally about it. Maybe you can go and buy the lingerie that you consider surplus and just try it on, or just go in even to a store and try it on and, make yourself feel sexy again. If you compare yourself to how you were 5 years ago or 10 years ago, just remember that everyone grows and changes. It's a cycle of life. You can't fight that. So there's no point comparing yourself to the youthful version of you, or, even if it's like a year ago. Don't make those comparisons. You are who you are now. But, I could go into a whole podcast on this, so I'm not going to. But if you have really worked out the crux is your self-confidence, and that's why you're not wanting sex anymore, or, you're not as adventurous, or sex has changed because you don't like to be seen, naked, etc., then that is definitely something for you to deal with. But you're going to have to be extremely honest with yourself on this one. Point number 9, perhaps self-pleasure has taken over, and you need to remind yourself of the benefits of two play. By this, I mean getting yourself off, masturbating. I very openly love my vibrator, and honestly, it is an easier, quicker option. I can be done in like 5 minutes, and I'm like, yep. Set to go about my day. Whereas obviously when I have sex, it's a whole thing, isn't it? Like, oh God, I'm going to get sweaty. Then my hair's going to be a mess. And, it's going to be at least 45 minutes. Like, it becomes a thing. So what wins when you want a quickie and move on and, you got shit to do? The vibrator that takes 5 minutes wins. Or, even if you don't need a vibrator, like lucky you, if you can do it with your fingers, and fair play, girl. But it is kind of sometimes the better option. If that is happening or has happened, where you find yourself completely demotivated with sex because you're really content with self-pleasure and it's kind of like now your preference, you need to push past that boundary and really remind yourself on why and how sex it feels so fucking good in the first place. I think with this one, you just basically have to drop the masturbation for a bit and you just try not to and be like, you know what, I'm not going to have any self-pleasure unless we're having sex, and really formulate it that way and bring sex back into your masturbation routine that you're now in. I laugh because, happened to me. And point number 10. Reflect and remember when, why, and how you first fell in love. Always bring it back to those beginning things. I know it's a honeymoon phase and it changes, but this is your life partner. You love each other so much. You fancy each other. The sex was incredible, and remind yourself of that. Don't take the current situation, especially if you're living through a curveball moment that we spoke about earlier. Don't take that as this is how it is now, Be like, fuck, do you remember this? This was incredible. I remember loving this. Just reflect and remind yourself of why you're with your person, why you love your person, and think about the sex with your person and how incredible that sex and that connection together makes you feel. I hope this has helped you guys. Please do slide into my DMs as always if you want more personal advice on this subject. It's not fun and it's quite a tricky one to broach, so I hope I have helped on some level. And yeah, go forth and make love and be happy. And that's the end of this episode. Thanks for listening to the Sex and Singapore City podcast. This episode was produced and hosted by me, Nick Selena, and recorded at the Splicecast studio in Singapore. I'm available to listen to on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google, and all major podcast listening apps. Do subscribe to enjoy a new episode every Monday evening. Please do give me a 5-star review. It helps other people also find my podcast. For more awesome content and features to read, you can check out my website, sexandsingaporecity.com. That's sexandsingaporecity.com. I'm also on social media. Simply search @Nick Selena. Nixalina to find me. Don't be shy, come say hi.